Okay. Here are the pathways of the glossopharyngeal nerve, nerve 9. First pathway, the branchial motor, goes through the jugular foramen and down to the stylopharyngeus muscle in arch 3. Here is the sensory pathway that goes through the jugular foramen and down to the carotid body and carotid sinus, and also branches off to the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Here is the taste pathway through the jugular foramen and down to the other posterior 1/3 of the tongue. And here is the parasympathetic pathway through the jugular foramen, through the eardrum, cranial cavity, down to the otic ganglion, into the parotid gland. Here again is the sensory pathway through the foramen ovale and up to the auriculotemporal nerve, the skin near the ear. Here are the pathways of the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7. The first pathway is the branchial motor that goes through the internal auditory meatus and down to the muscles of facial expression on arch 2. The next one is the taste pathway that goes through the internal auditory meatus, through the eardrum and styloid process, and down to the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. The sensory pathway goes through the foramen ovale and down to the other posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Here is the sympathetic pathway that goes through the carotid canal and branches off in the pterygopalatine fossa. Next one is the parasympathetic pathway that goes through the internal auditory meatus, goes to the pterygopalatine fossa, and branches off to the nasal cavity, the lacrimal gland, the front teeth and gums, through the palatine canals into the back teeth and palate, and goes to the internal auditory meatus, through the eardrum, through the styloid process, to the submandibular ganglion, and branches off into the submandibular gland and the sublingual gland. Okay, here are the cranial nerves of the embryo. Here are the 3 capsules which hold the special sense nerves. Here is the olfactory placode, which is cranial nerve number 1, olfactory nerve for smell. Here is the optic placode, which is cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve for vision. Here is the otic placode, which is cranial nerve number 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve for hearing and balance. And here are the somites. These are the preotic somites with the preotic nerves. Here is the first preotic somite, cranial nerve number 3, the oculomotor nerve, which means the eyeballs. The second preotic somite, which is cranial nerve number 4, the trochlear nerve for the superior oblique muscle of the eyeball. And here is the third preotic somite, cranial nerve number 6, the abducens nerve for the lateral muscle of the eye. Here are the postotic nerves. The 3 here are cranial nerve number 12, the hypoglossal nerve, which are tongue muscles. Here are the gill pouches. They are all preotic nerves. Here's cranial nerve number 5, the trigeminal nerve with branches 1, the supraorbital nerve, branch 2, the infraorbital nerve, and branch 3, the mandibular nerve. Here is cranial nerve number 7. It is the facial nerve for facial expression. Here's cranial nerve number 9. The glossopharyngeal nerve for muscles of the pharynx and the sensory part of the tongue. Here's cranial nerve number 10, which is the vagus nerve. It's for the muscles of the pharynx, larynx, lungs, and organs of the gut tube. And here is cranial nerve number 11, which is a branch of the vagus nerve. It's the accessory nerve, and it's for trapezius and sternocleidomastoid muscles. And here is the mandibular arch, the hyoid arch, and these are the visceral arches.